Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 391 for the 17th of April 2016. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia with, where are they? A couple of little kittens running around my feet here. One's on one side of the door to the studio, one's on the other side, and they're sort of trying to put their paws under the door and batter each other. Oh, there they go. It's all happening here at Skeptic Zone HQ. Come on, you come up here with me. This one's Maud. I don't think you can hear her. She's looking at the microphone. What's that? I'll put you back down again. Come on, you. Well, the kittens do what kittens do, get into trouble. What's coming up on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone? We're going to kick off with an interview with an old skeptical buddy of mine, Lawrence Leung, the comedian, the showman, the TV star. He'll be in Sydney and Perth very soon to present his new show, Very Strange Things. And there'll be details for Sydney listeners and Perth listeners, how they can get their tickets to this show. I always look forward to catching up with Lawrence. He's a really clever guy. I remember years ago, maybe 10 plus years ago, we both appeared on the Triple J network here in Australia. I was in a studio in Sydney with my headphones on, and he was in a studio in Melbourne, so we couldn't see each other, but we could hear each other like we were in the same room to comment about, well, skeptical things. An interview of Lawrence Leung coming up at the top of the show. And after that, it's the Raw Skeptic Report with our dear friend Heidi Robertson up there in the north coast of New South Wales, the heartland, the epicentre, ground zero of the anti-vax movement. And she'll be presenting part of her continuing series on vaccine-preventable diseases. Today, it's diphtheria. Now, I didn't know much about diphtheria until I heard this report by Heidi. Thank you, Heidi. Now I know a lot more, and you will too soon. Diphtheria. That's the subject of the Raw Skeptic Report this week. Then to round off the show, Maynard's spooky action. Maynard, as listeners will remember, was at the Australian Skeptics dinner meeting last week. But apart from interviewing our speaker, Maynard was running around with his microphone. He talks to Dr. Mel from Melbourne, Cassandra Perryman from Brisbane, Wade Ness from Brisbane, and our own Tim Mendham, the editor of The Skeptic here in Sydney. And then we all drive home in the Skeptic Mobile. Well, that's Maynard's spooky action for you. I think it gives you a flavour of what fun we can have at the Australian Skeptics dinner meetings. They're really informal, relaxed. Good time is had by all, and it's a good chance just to chat with people. And that's something Maynard excels at. Oh, now don't forget to visit www.maynard.com.au for all of Maynard's madness, including Bunga Bunga, his own podcast he does with Tim Ferguson from the Doug Anthony All-Stars. Now, before we get stuck into the Skeptic Zone, a couple of stories buzzing around the skeptical spheres. One of those is the continuing story of the documentary Vaxxed by Andrew Wakefield, which was going to be at the Robert De Niro Film Festival, then was cancelled, and now it looks like Robert De Niro might be unclear as to whether he's pro or anti-vax. Looks like he could be falling into the trap of what Jim Carrey fell into some years back, claiming that we should just make vaccines safe. It's a bit strange, this story, but it reminds us once again that no matter how wonderful people are at their profession, like Robert De Niro, unquestionably one of the greatest actors of this or any other generation, it doesn't mean he's qualified to speak on vaccine safety. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. Another story that's just come to my attention today is a story from the Sunshine Coast Daily newspaper up in Queensland, sunshinecoastdaily.com.au, and just looking online, the headline is, Cowgirl Chooses Alternative Therapies to Treat Cancer. And it's a long story about this young lady who has got cancer. The doctors have given her something of a 50-50 shot if she keeps up her chemo or uses chemo, but she's rejected all that to more or less follow a course of alternative therapies, which includes a change of diet. So she's eating organic food, fresh vegetables grown from her own garden and things like this. And she's also on a program of regular supplements and drinks lots of alkaline water. And she's also started high doses of vitamin C intravenously and using an infrared sauna every day. Dearie me. Look, I'll put a link to the show notes, but if you just go to sunshinecoastdaily.com.au or Google Cowgirl Chooses Alternative Therapies to Treat Cancer, you can read more about that. We'll see if we can follow up this story. There's a lot of, as I scroll down the website here, there are a lot of comments by skeptics and knowledgeable people, including our own Ken McLeod, who Skeptic Zone listeners may well remember. And one of their biggest comments is the fact that the Sunshine Coast Daily is not treating this story with the balance it should be getting. A story we might keep tabs on. Well, that's enough from me. It's time for me to run downstairs. Oh, hello. Now one's in the curtain. Come here. Out. But now it's time for me to run downstairs. Open up the cupboard. Make myself a nice cup of chicken noodle soup. Oh, yes. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now on the line all the way from the sun-drenched shores of Melbourne. Melbourne, 4 seasons in one day, so they say. It's my old friend, comedian and skeptic, Lawrence Leung. Hello, Lawrence.
Right, I'm great. How are you doing, Richard?
Actually, I'm not doing too bad. I'm not doing too bad. I'm getting myself back together again after a funny sort of year it's been. But I'm certainly, one of the things that's going to brighten my mood no end is coming along to see your show in Sydney. And this is, folks, it's a part of the Sydney Comedy Festival. And this is going to be on the 22nd and the 23rd of April, so very soon, this week, in fact, later on this week.
The Friday and Saturday, to be exact.
That's right, at the Sydney Town Hall. The show is called Very Strange Things, and it's travelling off to Perth, but let's have a talk about that. And I understand it was quite a big hit in the Melbourne Comedy Festival.
Yeah. It just finished up at Melbourne Comedy Festival last week. Did a 4-week season, which is always great. So by the time it gets to Sydney, you'll get the pristine version of the show. It's well run in, match fit. The show is called Very Strange Things, and I think it will appeal to a lot of your subscribers and listeners because it's about, I guess, my love of the paranormal, or to put it more plainly, my love of trying to work out why people believe the things that they believe. And so this show the theme of this show is a little bit different to my Unbelievable TV show. My Unbelievable TV show is, I guess, searching about is the truth out there, or is it all just in our heads? But with this show, it kind of shows the two different sides of my personality, and also a lot of skeptics, I imagine, where on one hand, we're a little bit like Scully. In fact, we're a lot like Scully, very skeptical. But deep down, there's also a little bit of a Mulder in us. Part of the reason why, I guess, for me personally, why I'm interested in the skeptical and the critical thinking side of things, especially when it comes to the supernatural, is because when I was younger, I really wanted to believe that ghosts and UFOs and psychics existed. And but as I grew up, I decided to do the right thing, which was to investigate and use my brain and try to discover whether these things were real or not. And I've come out the other end as an adult skeptic going, possibly it's not quite as real as I thought when I was a kid. But how about if I set up a show where I set up a context where the audience, whether they're a skeptic or a believer, I'll set up conditions for them to experience some very strange things, and it's up to them as audience members to decide where they want to take it and what they want to believe. Because after all, there's art and culture and movies out there where we allow ourselves to suspend, disbelief or suspend belief for a second. We understand as rational people, we can suspend disbelief in theatre.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm providing for the audience.
That sounds good to me. I always suspend my disbelief and my belief. What is it actually? Do you suspend your belief?
I don't know. As I was saying it, I was thinking, I think it's a suspension of – they say there's suspension of disbelief, I think it is, but that doesn't make sense to me. It should be suspending your belief anyway.
Whatever it is you suspend, I quite like doing that because I quite enjoy seeing the latest – silly sci-fi offering or the superheroes running around with their capes and everything. And I don't mind that they're destroying the laws of physics or ignoring them or paradox can't possibly happen as long as I get a laugh and a chuckle and I'm entertained for half an hour. But this show sounds, because it's a live show, it does sound very interesting. Now, I had the great pleasure of coming to see your last live show here in Sydney, which was, was that, what was that, not part of the comedy festival, was it?
It was indeed part of the comedy festival.
It was, right.
Yeah, it was called The Escapist. And
yes, that's right. That's right. It's all coming back to me now, how you escaped embarrassing situations and stuff.
That's right.
And that was fantastic. The night I was there, it was a full house and everybody had a good time. And I understand, just getting back to the very strange things, the shows in Melbourne were very well received, and I guess everybody had a great time.
Yeah. I've been having packed houses, and audiences have been, they've been awesome. I've also got some, really great reviews from the reviewers. I think it's a slightly different show because it's not quite a stand-up comedy show. It's like almost a TED Talk mixed with a psychological illusion, an experiment show mixed with a personal travelogue of me trying to talk about how when I sort of met James Randi or I went to haunted castles. So there's a lot going on in the show, and it's very packed, but it all fits in within an hour. And I do take some audience members from I know they're super, super skeptical, but I've managed to get them to read each other's PIN numbers off the top of their heads, and I've done all sorts of, you would call, psychological trickery and almost mentalism mind games in order to simulate these very strange things for our audiences, whether they be believers or skeptics.
I think, I mean, I'm all for it. I think that's fabulous. I love seeing how people's minds can be, I don't want to say messed with. That's not really what you do. You fool with them into a way, but it's all done in a nice way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I guess I believe that there are two types of people. There are the puzzle solvers in the world, and there's also the mystery lovers. And mystery lovers are people who don't want to know how things are done. And the more amazing something is, the less they want to know. They want to preserve that sense of awe. And then there's the other people, and I'm sure you're one of these people, is the puzzle solver, someone who knows that there's an explanation for everything. And it will keep you up at night thinking about the possible explanation behind a mystery. I very much fall in that camp as well, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners do. And I set that premise up at the very start of the show, and then I provide some, seemingly astounding illusions and mind games. And we as an audience, I take them. I take the hand and basically let them decide what type of person they want to be in this evening. So even if you're a skeptic, can you close your eyes for a second and switch off your brain? But I find the hilarious thing is to see people in the bar after the show discussing everything that just happened, trying to figure out the intricacies, the tricks, the dual realities. It's a really fun interactive show.
Well, one of my great loves in the whole skeptical sphere is the participation of magic, and particularly mentalism. Mentalism is is such a superb, special field of magic. And anybody who's seen a good mentalist or has been on the end of being in the audience and you've been called up and you've just had your socks knocked off by a good mentalist knows. And the psychology, the mind games that are going on between the performer and the subject, it's deeply fascinating for me because partly because it's terrific stuff. It's so clever. But it really, really does relate in many ways to the way the mind of a believer can work, I find.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, James Randi recently came to Australia and he had his documentary with him, An Honest Liar. And the great thing is he's a magician who will tell you up front that he's tricking you, and then he keeps his promise. And in many ways, mentalists do the same thing. They tell you this is it's psychological illusions. I'm not psychic. I talk about this all the time in my show. I say nothing I do here is psychic, despite the fact that you will claim that I am. I try my best to convince you, and I close down various methods that charlatans from way back, even in the spiritualist era during the seances. I have a seance in my show, and I basically explain how they used to do it, and then I close all those doors. I close those possible explanations and do a similar type of thing with a completely different method, just to show that you can really be fooled. But at least I'm not fooling people into believing that I can contact their lost ones. I am fooling people for entertainment.
Which is fantastic. Yeah, which James Randi says it's a noble art for the purposes of entertainment.
Yeah.
And once it goes beyond that, and we can name certain people who use it for the forces of evil, we might say, it's such a pity because it's such a wonderful art form, an entertaining art form. It's such a pity some people do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the show is, of course, Very Strange Things. I'm so looking forward to it, Lawrence. I really enjoy your live shows. And
thank you.
It's going to Perth. Have you performed in Perth before?
Yeah, I have. I've done various comedy festivals down there.
Wow.
Perth audiences are absolutely amazing. They all come out and support. They're really smart and lovely crowds. And I think this show is very different, obviously, to all the other stand-up comedy shows that I've usually done. They're usually quite storytelling based, or just get up there and say what's the deal with this or that. But I've kind of used all those skills together of storytelling and telling jokes, but mashed it together with my love of critical thinking, skepticism, and also, deep down, I love a good sort of hoax and a good bit of psychic fakery. So I love playing with the audiences, and so I'm taking the show also to Perth in May. So Friday the 6th, Saturday 7th, and Sunday the 8th of May at the Perth Town Hall. At the
Perth Town Hall. I was just about to say that, yes, folks, you can get your tickets for Sydney or Melbourne. The best thing to do is head over to the website for Lawrence, and that is www.lawrenceleung.com. And I will put a link to the show note. Or if you just Google Lawrence Leung, or you Google Lawrence Sydney Comedy Festival, you're pretty easy to find, I think.
Yeah, pretty easy to find. I've got unusual spelling. It's an L-A-W for Lawrence and also an L-E-U-N-G for Leung. But, pretty easy to find. I think I'm the only Lawrence Leung in Australia. No, I can't say that. There's probably a lot of Lawrence Leungs in Australia. I'm the only one with a beard.
Oh, yes, you might well be right, Lawrence. You might well be right. And just getting back to the Perth crowds, I totally agree, because you were just mentioning when James Randi was out here not so long ago to show his documentary, The Honest Liar. Of course, you and I were a part of that tour, which was just one of those experiences I'm sure we'll treasure forever. But I remember the audience in Perth were particularly enthusiastic. They were great.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how if a lot of international headliners like James Randi or even international bands, how many of them get out there to Western Australia? But they should, because the Perth crowds are very supportive, and they're really bang up for it when people come visit their town. So, I'm sure when James Randi was there, the dearly devoted came out in droves.
They did. They were good. They were great. They were so receptive and enthusiastic, and they gave Randy such a welcome. I won't forget that in a hurry. Anyway, Lawrence, good to catch up with you. I can't wait to see the show, folks. There's your cue. There's your hint. We can't give you much more prompting than this. Please get your tickets for Lawrence Leung's show Very strange things. If you're a skeptic, particularly if you're a believer, you might enjoy it as well. If you're into curiosities and how the mind works, I think it'll be a fantastic night. And Lawrence, I look forward to seeing you at your show.
I will see you there, Richard, and I'll see you all there.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Hej svenska skeptiker! Du vet väl att vetenskap och folkbildning inte bara är trogna anhängare av The Skeptic Zone utan också arrangerar föredrag, pop-science-quiz och skeptikerträffar runt om i Sverige. Gå in på www.vof.se för att spana in vad våra 7 olika lokalföreningar runt om i landet har på gång. Och om du bor i en stad där det inte finns någon lokalförening, varför inte starta en själv? Jag pratar med dig, Umeå. Hello all skeptics in Sweden! I'm sure you already know that the Swedish Skeptics Association not only is a big fan of the Skeptic Zone, but that we also organize lectures, pop science quiz and skeptics in the pub all over the country. Go to www.vof.se to see what our 7 local chapters are up to. And if you live in a place where there is no local chapter, why not start one yourself? I'm talking to you, Umeå.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hello there, Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters. Continuing on with my series on vaccine-preventable diseases, this week it's diphtheria's turn. Diphtheria, a devastating disease. An extremely effective and safe vaccine. The anti-vaccination crowd would have you think that it is a mild disease, or that it would be treated effectively with natural remedies, or that homeoprophylaxis is just as effective as vaccination, or that a healthy person would not be able to contract it. They would have you believe that the ingredients of the vaccine are more dangerous than the disease itself. They disingenuously post graphs which show mortality rates declining before the vaccine was introduced, neglecting to include morbidity or incidence rates. This is a very common tactic. Let's be really clear on this. Every death, from just about everything you can imagine, declined with the advent of better medical treatments, sanitation and preventative care. The incidence of disease is never included in the anti-vaccination graphs. They are wrong, they are dangerous, and they are putting us at risk of having to deal with this strangling angel of children all over again. Regrettably, it is timely to talk about this particular disease because of a diagnosed case reported here in northern New South Wales over Easter. The case has been reported in several media outlets. I'm going to read the one that appeared in a local online outlet, the Echo Net Daily. Quote, "Woman contracts diphtheria at Rabbits Eat Lettuce, April 11, 2016, by Chris Dobney. A rare case of the deadly bacterial disease diphtheria has been reported in the Northern Rivers, and it appears that the woman contracted it while attending a doof near Casino over Easter. As many as 10% of diphtheria sufferers die from the disease, which is extremely rare in Western countries. The woman who contracted it attended the Rabbits Eat Lettuce doof, and festival organisers have informed attendees on the event's Facebook page. Stop the Australian Anti-Vaccination Network spokesperson, Surgeon John Cunningham, said that diphtheria was, quote, easily preventable in this day and age with a simple vaccination. This is a disease that we haven't seen in Australia for some years. In 2011, a 22-year-old unvaccinated Queensland woman died from the disease, Mr Cunningham said. Quote, before that, there were a handful of cases in the Northern Territory in the early 90s. It would be a tragedy if this new case had a fatal outcome. End quote. Diphtheria is spread through coughing and sneezing, with the infected person being contagious for up to 2 weeks after infection. The incubation period for diphtheria is up to 10 days, but most commonly between 2 and 5 days. People who attended Rabbits Eat Lettuce and have subsequently fallen ill within that time period are advised to seek medical attention. Symptoms include respiratory problems, a runny nose, sore throat, hoarse voice, swollen neck glands, and fever and chills. Complications may include inflammation of the heart, myocarditis, inflammation of the nerves, kidney problems, and bleeding problems due to low blood platelets. Myocarditis may result in an abnormal heart rate, and inflammation of the nerves may result in paralysis." End quote. As of today, the 13th of April, there has been no further news on the condition of this particular patient. As the Echo article states, diphtheria is a serious bacterial disease that causes severe inflammation of the nose, throat and windpipe or trachea. Although the Echo article stated that it is communicable for up to 2 weeks, the Australian Immunisation Handbook states that it is actually up to 4 weeks. It is spread by either airborne transmission or by direct contact with skin lesions or items contaminated by an infected person. The bacteria produce toxins that cause a greyish or green membrane to grow in the throat, over the tonsils and nasopharynx, which in turn leads to difficulty with swallowing, speaking, and then later breathing, until the person may ultimately suffocate to death. For this reason, diphtheria has historically been called the strangling angel of children. In Australia, diphtheria caused more deaths than any other infectious disease up until the widespread use of the vaccine in the 1940s, and worldwide it was also a leading cause of death in children, with outbreaks in Europe and America in the 18th century and in the 1990s in Russia and Eastern Europe. Today, diphtheria is virtually unheard of in developed countries thanks to a vaccine that has an estimated clinical efficacy of 97%. In fact, I was talking with a few locals just a couple of days ago about this case, and 2 of them had never heard of diphtheria. There has been speculation that because we haven't seen these diseases in our lifetimes, or we're forgetting what these diseases are like, some are becoming complacent about vaccinating, which is likely contributing to their unnecessary return. It's more likely that cases of diphtheria in developed countries are imported from developing countries, highlighting the need for travellers to be up to date with their vaccinations. This was the case with a diphtheria death in Queensland in 2011, and the case in northern New South Wales is also said to be from an international traveller. You may have also heard of the death of a 3-year-old who died from diphtheria in Belgium in March of this year, and a 6-year-old boy last year in Spain, whose parents had decided not to vaccinate him. After his death, the parents revealed how they felt the anti-vaccination movement had, quote, tricked them. Both the child and the parents were victims of anti-vaccination propaganda. Thankfully, they went on to vaccinate their younger child. After that little boy's death in Spain, The Conversation published an article titled, quote, "Strangling Angel of Diphtheria Caught Spain Off Guard. Here's How," end quote. If you haven't heard of The Conversation, they describe themselves as, quote, "an independent source of news and views, sourced from the academic and research community and delivered direct to the public," end quote. It's well worth checking out their website and Facebook page for accurate and credible science-based articles. A quote from this particular Conversation piece that was written by Dora Varga and David Bryan, quote, "Falling vaccination rates, complex population movements, and the disappearance of international health practices perceived as redundant all contribute to the emergence and spread of infectious diseases that were thought forgotten," end quote. And this, quote, When distrust in public health organisations and practices, or the breakdown of relationship between state and citizens, give way to faltering vaccination rates, whether through anti-vaccination movements or through lack of access to vaccines, forgotten diseases can make a quick comeback. The case of diphtheria reminds us of the very real stakes at hand when infectious diseases re-emerge and throw light on the personal, national and international consequences of declaring the end of a disease." End quote. The vaccine contains a weakened form of the bacterial toxin called a toxoid and works by stimulating the body to produce an antitoxin, a specific antibody that neutralises diphtheria toxin. It is given as part of the immunisation schedule in Australia, combined with the tetanus and acellular pertussis vaccines. It is given at 2, 4 and 6 months of age, although the first dose can be given as early as 6 weeks due to the high morbidity and possibly mortality associated with pertussis in very young infants. Booster vaccines in Australia are recommended at 18 months and 4 years of age, and another for adolescents. Adults who reach the age of 50 years without having received a booster in the previous 10 years are also advised to receive a further diphtheria booster dose given along with tetanus and pertussis. If diphtheria is contracted, the treatment is hospitalisation and isolation, antibiotics, surgery to remove the membrane if necessary, treatment of other complications, and an antitoxin, which may be difficult to source. In the case of the 6-year-old in Spain, the antitoxin had to be flown in from Russia, as Spain had not seen diphtheria for 3 decades and did not have any antitoxin available. In the United States, there are no licensed antitoxin products available in the entire country. There have been calls for a Central European stockpile that all countries can access if needed. Tracheotomies were performed commonly on diphtheria patients throughout the 1800s to bypass the swelling in the throat. It has been reported that about a quarter of people who had tracheotomies during that time died due to infection from the procedure. Interestingly, it was because of diphtheria that in 1858 a French paediatrician invented endotracheal intubation, a much less invasive technique of bypassing the membrane and keeping the airway open until the membrane resolved. Paramedics and anaesthetists now routinely use intubation every day, all around the world, to maintain a patent airway for the unconscious patient. I learned intubation myself in theatres under the guidance of anaesthetists as part of my intensive care paramedic training, but at the time I had no idea of the history behind the procedure, just as at the time I had no idea that there was such a thing as the anti-vaccination movement. To get an idea of how prevalent and tragic this disease was, I refer to 2 descriptions by the Facebook group Refutations to Anti-Vaccination Memes, another group worth checking out. The first has a picture of a gravestone with the names of 4 children of the same family, aged between 1 to 11 years of age, who succumbed to diphtheria within 11 days of each other. The other is a letter from 1881 describing the deaths of 4 children within 1 week from Wisconsin, United States, again siblings, aged between 3 and 11. The letter describes diphtheria as the fell destroyer. This has been Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters Group. We can be found on Facebook, Wikipedia, and on Twitter at NRVaxSupporters, that's VAX. Thank you. Until next time, keep well and vaccinate.
Sziasztok!
Всем привет!
Hejsan allihop!
Guys, I just had the most amazing experience.
What experience, Andras?
Andras, have you been to the pub? I told you not to hang out with Marsh. You know he was blessed by Peter Popov.
No, Jelena, I'm not talking about psychics. It was a real ESP experience.
You have been to the pub. Either that or you've been smoking something.
No, Pontus, the ESP is the European Skeptics podcast. It's the most amazing thing. You get to know so much about skeptics and their activities across Europe. You know, events, hot topics, and interviews with lots of interesting people.
Oh wow, cool. By the way, Pontus, you just committed the false dichotomy fallacy.
I guess that means I'm really wrong.
Yep. And you can even learn about those fallacies on the show and hear about people spreading silly ideas. You should really check it out. It's the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast. It's on every week.
Alright, so where can I get this ESP experience? It sounds good.
You can go online at theesp.eu, follow it on Twitter at espodcast_EU, or like the podcast on Facebook. Oh, and you can also contact the show by sending them an email to info@theesp.eu. And if you want to subscribe, do a quick search for the European Skeptic Podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Stitcher.
I don't know how you can believe.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, we're here at the big meeting now. You can see the dessert line stretching across the room now. Richard, what is it for dessert, by the way?
I just had the chocolate mousse.
Wow. Now, did the chocolate mousse evolve from like a chocolate amoeba? How did that work, Richard?
Sometimes, Maynard, you just don't ask questions. It was created in the kitchen.
If it's a chocolate mousse, it had to evolve from something.
That was intelligently designed in the kitchen, I tell you.
Okay, right. Yeah, well, we know what school Richard's from. And who have we got here?
Hello, it's Dr. Mel from down south.
Wow. What's a biologist doing here at a Skeptics dinner?
Well, I came for a haircut in Katoomba and I thought I'd pop by.
Fair enough, too. And I've got to say, that's where the good deal can be had on a haircut in Sydney is Katoomba. You get any closer to the city, you just got to hand your wallet over and walk away.
Exactly. I mean, I do pay for the airfare, the return airfare to get here from Geelong, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, let me tell you, because it will cost more than that. If you go to Newtown, you can just forget it.
No.
You've got to use some of the more heavier elements of the periodic table to pay for your haircut in Newtown.
No, I don't deal in platinum. I just use normal currency up in Katoomba.
Now, what have you been up to in the world of science and skepticism lately, Dr. Mel?
Okay, what have I been doing lately?
Of course, you would know her, of course, from the great speech that you gave at the Brisbane Skeptics.
Yes, I was the crack busting. It's just got personal, and as an extension on the topics that I spoke of in the Brisbane Convention last year, I've been recently active on the stem cells topic and was asked to speak by the Australian Academy of Science about being a patient advocate for rejecting the quackery surrounding autologous stem cell transplants.
Wow. And how did that go? Well, what sort of audience, how receptive were they?
They were very receptive. I was interviewed on several ABC stations. I also got page 3 of a Murdoch paper, which was my life goal unlocked.
Well, yes, I mean, normally that's reserved for other things.
Well, exactly. I got to keep my clothes on, but I got to be page 3 of a Murdoch paper. I think it was The Australian. I think something, one of those. But, they're all the same.
But enough about pulp media. So what's the next move? I mean, how are you trying to get out there and push your agenda onto society in the scientific good way?
Well, I use social media, which is occasionally criticised by some proportions of my life, but that's okay, because actually the greater good for making sure that quack busting happens is more important than what any individual suffers in sort of consequence to speaking out. And so I've had people occasionally try and silence my voice. And I say to them, you picked the wrong little black duck for that. But if a girl is being asked to comment by the Australian Academy of Science, she's doing okay. That's what I say to you.
And so where can we catch up with you online or see what you've been up to?
You can come and talk to me at drmel_T, or you can look on my blog. Not that I've written it up lately, but occasionally I write on there. But if you come and chat to me on Twitter, I'm usually available.
And what is the latest issue, or the one that's going to be coming up in the near future you see as being on the horizon of being sceptical interest to people having a flame war about?
Well, I mean, as I say, I've got a personal interest in the autologous stem cell loophole being closed by the TGA, and we're pushing quite hard. And as I say, I was asked by the Australian Academy of Science to speak as a patient advocate as well as a scientist on this topic.
Is there something beyond that? Does it open another can of worms?
Well, it does open the regulation can of worms, and so the anti-stem cell regulation people are saying, well, it's going to limit research, yada, yada, yada. But I say to them, I can't do research on my topic, which is infectious diseases, without ethics applications and without proper scrutiny, and so neither should they. Suck it up, princess.
Yeah, that's Dr. Mel, not making a lot of friends in some areas, but making more friends in others.
That's right.
We've got someone here who's not at all nervous because we know that the big conference is going to be held in Melbourne this year. But look, as it was held in a nuclear bunker last time, devoid of sunlight, we've got someone who gave us the great example of the Brisbane Skeptics. Who have we got here? And tell us why Melbourne is going to be a hard act to follow after Brisbane.
Well, I can tell you first off that we don't have 4 seasons in one day up in Brisbane. We just have one season. It's just summer. Just summer. So if you need to get your year's worth of vitamin D, that's
and you want your dog to get dead.
Well, we won't discuss that because no dogs at the conference, right? No, there were no dogs. No dogs presented.
Because it gets really hot.
Oh, it gets really hot. So thankfully, we all survived. Nobody melted at last year's convention, and so Melbourne's going to have a hard time because it's not that people are going to melt at the Melbourne convention. It's that they're going to freeze, or they're going to drown, or they're going to dress inappropriately, and they're going to be peeling off layers. So you're going to have a clothing pile in the lobby.
Okay.
Because so it's kind of hard to follow Brisbane on that front.
It's going to be a tough one, but we're going to be there. We're going to have fun. I will have to stay in South Melbourne again, not far from that Dracula's Castle thing. That was fantastic. Look, there was me. It was really good. And the Skeptics. What a weekend. So you couldn't match that in Brisbane.
Who are you? Well, I don't know. You didn't party with me. They're mimes, avocados, ropes.
Sorry, we forgot to mention who you are. Hang on. Hang on, sorry.
The editor here, the producer. Maynard, get to the point. Who is this charming woman and what's her story?
Well, see, I thought I gave her a lead-in in such a way that she would say her name and who she was in the first sentence because I
Too much fun to keep going.
Okay. Well, what I was trying to say is because Brisbane was so good, why would you say Brisbane was so good? Brisbane was really great last year. Why was it so good?
Why was it? Well, me, right? Isn't it me? Aren't I the reason that Brisbane was so good? One Miss Dr. Awesome who got to do a stage show with Richard.
It's the producer here again. Who are you?
Goodness me, I'm doing a lot of work here and I'm getting nothing.
No, I'm Cassandra. I'm the current president of the Brisbane Skeptic Society. Now, I was not the president at the time of the convention. I was the convention organizer, so I can't take credit for being the president at the time, but I was the chick in the pink shirt on the far right-hand side of the stage at the end of the weekend.
Right. You were one of the troublemakers.
I was the troublemaker. I was also in a tiara flirting with Richard all night on the dinner. That was the best part, honestly.
But tell me, what's going on with the Brisbane Skeptics? You obviously had the huge triumph and you've been resting on your laurels ever since the conference, but what have you been doing up in Brisbane to bust stuff in the skeptical way?
Well, we've been trying to. Our membership has grown quite a bit, and we're very happy to have the larger membership. So we're kind of
into double figures now.
Absolutely into double figures, nearing triple. Woo! Oh, yeah. So we're trying to just consolidate. We're trying to become a friendlier organization, not so much of a rogue newbie organization.
No, that one where you'd go to. It was great. You'd go to. If someone was like a herbalist or something, you'd go to their house, knock on the door, put a parcel, set fire to it, and then open the door. That was a great trick.
That's very rogue, very rogue.
The Flaming Edgar. It worked every time.
It works great. They change their minds instantly. The smell of multiple aromatherapies at once, just not good.
But is there a new woo in Queensland that you're combating?
Well, currently speaking, I am a doctorate of psychology, and I have been combating psychological woo in Queensland.
Oh, so what have people been pushing that you think that's not a good thing?
Well, it'll take a lot of pennies out of your pocket. Those lovely coloring books will. They're fun if you like to color. They're not therapy.
Oh, yes, adult colouring books. Now, is this going back to the whole 30s thing when no one had much money and they did needlepoint and things like that? So is it giving you something to do on the train when you're not looking at your phone?
It's a lot less stabby than needlepoint, yes, basically. But the problem is that it's being rebranded as a self-help. And it's not anything more than a colouring book. Read a book. Talk to a friend.
Like brain plasticity was used by someone fairly famous recently. Yeah.
That one's a brilliant one because it's on just enough science to make it great woo. Just enough plasticity science.
Look, if you do have to do a colouring book, I can highly recommend the Children's Satanist colouring book from the US. That's the one that because they were making Bibles being handed out in class, they said, well, look, if we're a religion, you should have to hand out us as well. And guess what? They stopped handing out Bibles as soon as but the Satanist colouring in book is the thing.
I highly recommend the C is for Cthulhu children's colouring book as well. It's fantastic.
Wow, that is pretty cool. So people are thinking that this is some genuine psychological therapy to do colouring in.
Yes, they absolutely are believing that this is self-help for depression and anxiety and a lot of things that it does not help, especially if you don't like to colour. Can you imagine? You buy these pens, you buy these colouring books, and then you sit down to colour thinking it's going to help your anxiety, and then suddenly you realise you hate colouring.
There's probably more evidence that minor alcohol abuse is going to be better for you than that. Because at least you get to meet people, and initially it works. Sure, it doesn't work in the long term, but initially...
You reduce your stress and your anxiety, just stay away from AA, because that really does... Anyway, that doesn't work either.
Wow. So this is very interesting. So be careful of colouring in books, be careful of drinking too much, be careful of meeting the wrong people. Anything else we should know?
Well, and come to the Brisbane Skeptic Society's meetings.
And how do we find you guys online?
We are at brisbaneskeptics.org.
Cool. Okay. Maynard here with Tim. At the end of the night, you're tired, your wig is wet, your chiffon is dirty. It's been a huge night here. You've been flogging copies of The Skeptic, of course, the world's second oldest skeptical magazine.
I'll put some photos of you in there, Maynard, if you want.
Yeah, that'll sell.
But it is the best. It was actually voted, a recent survey came across 100% said it's the best best skeptical magazine in the world.
Well, and rightfully so.
And Richard said so. Who voted? Just one person.
And now tell us, you've had a few speakers here over the years at a skeptical dinner. Yes. How did this one rack up tonight?
I think it was great, actually. I think it covered a lot of stuff, and very clearly we had a lot of discussion of phylogenetics, which of course is one of our favourite topics.
Well, the thing that I heard that really wasn't elaborated on enough, really, was that there was a mention that the UFOs are the work of Satan, and I had to yell out, "Finally, we get to talk about it." But then that was it. They breezed past it. So is there something being covered up tonight?
Absolutely, I think he shouldn't have said that. Right? No. That was a major error. We warned him not to cover that topic, but no, he came and spilled the beans.
I believe conspiracy theorists would call that a canary in the coal mine. He was just giving the little bit of a hint of what really is going on.
I thought canaries died. They died first. Okay, right.
But how did they react to the whole talk?
They enjoyed it very much, as you've just heard. Actually.
Thank you. They had a great time.
They had a great time, actually. Yes. Well, we always do. Actually, we got a good crowd today. A goodly lot of people who of all different ages, all different religions, etc. I think they really enjoyed it. They had a good time and a good meal.
Look, the only thing I just wonder if you could implement, and it might be a bit difficult, is when someone is asked to ask a question and they start with, "I once had a..." that doesn't sound like it's a question.
No. We do actually ask people to ask a question, not make a comment or another speech. But then again, you can't really rip the microphone out of their hands, actually, as much as you might like to. But then again, there have been people who go on and 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 on.
So what was the takeaway for you tonight from the creationists versus evolution argument? Do you think we can look at that here in Australia and learn something from that?
There are big differences. There are big differences between the creationist movement in the US and the creationist movement here. And some of them are good and some of them are bad. I mean, the American one is a lot more overt. They take it to court, a local sort of councils, a local school areas, etc., making their own decisions, the local states making their own decisions, etc. We don't have that situation. We do have national curricula, right, that actually covers that, and creationism is not included in that. But there are certainly arguments that people are trying to put to include creationism in science classes made by individuals, obviously, creation believers, and that happens under the radar, unfortunately. So the Americans are bigger, stronger, but more overt. The Australians are smaller, but less overt, and sort of they tend to get down under the radar. At the same time, the Americans don't allow religion in schools, especially state schools. They actually sort of keep it out, whereas we have it as part of our of the school curricula, primary and high school.
But then again, our head of state is also the head of the Anglican Church.
Oh, you mean that lady over there?
Yeah, that one.
Right, okay. Okay.
So we haven't really got separation of church and state. We've actually got
I'm talking about church and education. Especially in state schools, right? That's the difference. In America, they don't have it, right? They don't have scripture classes in their classes, but they are trying to teach creationism in science. And so we do have scripture classes in our schools, but they don't try and teach creationism in science, by and large. So there are real ups and downs. But as I said, creationism was very strong in Australia. A lot of the sort of creation science movement was developed here, and then it was exported to the US, and we got the anti-vaccination people in return.
That's a bum deal.
I think so, yeah. It wasn't very good. I don't know who organised that one.
That's great.
It's going to rise.
So we'll have a little post-dinner chat here, possibly for. Remember, it's for the Skeptic Zone, so don't
No knockers.
Maynard here in the skeptical Hyundai from that great car-making nation of South Korea that brought you such great cars as. Anyway, in the back we've got a few people here. Hi, Richard. How's it going in the driver's seat?
I'm in the driver's seat, Maynard. I'm doing okay. We had a good night.
Yeah. You used to have the Mitsubishi Skeptical Mobile, didn't you?
We had to retire the Mitsubishi Skeptical Mobile. Now we've got the Hyundai.
Yeah, it's going quite well. And in the back we've got...
Dr. Mel.
Wade Ness.
I guess I'm Dr. Cass then in the back of this car.
Right. Now, this is the first time you've had 5 people in the car, Richard. How's it handling?
Just.
So think of this as a bit of a skeptical Top Gear we've got here. Right. Now, what did you make of our sort of audience and makeup of people at the dinner tonight, and the way it all rounded up as a topic? Because you haven't been before, Mel.
No, I just randomly appeared as a sort of gatecrasher this evening.
What do you make of it?
Well, it's fairly homogenous as a sort of adult baby boomer kind of activity. As you do, there was a few younger people there, but it always makes me feel...
Don't you go all anti-Bernie Sanders on me.
No.
I'm not voting for Hillary just because,
Oh, come on, she's got 2 X chromosomes, she's awesome. But, but there was a bit of diversity there. There was a few young people, there was some people from ethnic minorities. It was okay.
Okay. And how did you make it? You've been along to a few more before or not?
Oh, occasionally. I do attend.
Yeah. So what do you make of the Sydney Skeptics meeting as opposed to a more Queensland-based variety?
Well, it definitely was quite larger, I would say. So it was nice to have a whole room full of folks intently trying to think through a process rather than just sort of go with their guts.
And what do you think, Cassandra? Because have you been down to the Sydney Skeptics dinner before, and do you actually have them in Queensland?
Oh, we do have them in Queensland. We have both the Queensland Skeptics and the Brisbane Skeptics. But we have 2 different lecture series happening in Brisbane. This is my first Sydney one, and it's always a good impression when you come to one that's packed, right? Makes the Sydney Skeptics look really live and active. But I have to agree with Dr. Mel, a bit more homogenous than I would have liked to see, but just gives us something to work on. And
we were talking about the whole creationism versus evolution debate in Australia, and I guess it would be a slightly hotter topic in northern Queensland, perhaps.
Oh, goodness, yes. I have the lovely Jehovah's Witnesses that visit me every couple of weeks with their newest creationist material. It's great reading.
Hey, hang on. How often do they visit you?
About every other week, because it's hot, and because I love my neighbours, I soak up as much of their time as I can.
And this is an interesting point for any skeptic listening. Is it a good thing to get the debate going on your doorstep there, or is it best just to pretend you have to go to the toilet and shut the door in a hurry?
No, I actually enjoy getting the debate going, mainly because it shows the different side of skepticism, and, well, in my case, atheism as well. I'm not this mean, horrible, unreasonable person. I'm somebody that they can talk to, that they have some common ground with. I want the best for the future, and the kids too.
What about you, Dr. Mel, in Melbourne? Do you get door knockers that come and have opinions other to yourselves that you are polite to? How do you handle it?
Absolutely. I'm always happy to engage my Seventh-day Adventist American missionaries.
They have vegetarian recipes. Their vegetarian recipes are good.
I'm sure they do, but I'm a meat lover, but that's fine. But they give me their pamphlets, and look, it's this time of year, I light my fire with the Watchtower magazines, and I wish they'd come round soon so that I've got some kindling.
You get lots of them, too. They don't just give you one, they'll give you 10.
And they're really good. They're really good at lighting your fire.
Okay. Now, has anyone here actually read the magazine that they were referencing in that anti-evolution talk there, On Pandas and People? Has anyone actually ever seen On Pandas and People?
No, I want to read it now.
Yeah.
I tell you.
I have seen the On Pandas and People textbook, because that one little blip that ended up in Northern California where one of the fights was actually the high school district I went to.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow.
So...
And you still ended up a skeptic. Well done.
You know, nice big Mormon community.
Yeah.
It seeped right in there.
Yeah, no. And I've recently met with a Church of the Latter-day Saints Mormon that I went to school with as a primary school child. And he's just become friends with me on Facebook. And at Easter, he was very amusing because he's become a rampant atheist and posts all sorts of nasty memes over Easter, whereas his mother, father, and 10 brothers and sisters, I think, are still in the church.
Look, we've had a great night here, and look, why don't you just all say hello to all the Skeptic Zone listeners? Say you're listening to the Skeptic Zone all at once. 1, 2, 3.
You're listening to the Skeptic Zone.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. I wonder where those kittens are. It's a bit of a worry. They've sort of disappeared. They like to hide on the steps, so when I run down the steps I have to be careful. One will hide up the top, one will hide down the bottom. They stalk each other. It's quite fun. Don't forget, people in the Sydney area or the Blue Mountains area, I'll be speaking at Paracon Australia, Australia's paranormal convention. Woo! Yes, woo. If you visit www.paraconaustralia.com, you'll find out details. At the moment, I'm scheduled to speak on Saturday, the 28th of May, and that will be at 7 p.m. And my talk will be A Skeptic's Guide to Passing the $1 Million Challenge. Well, basically, it's a skeptic's guide to passing any of these skeptical challenges around the world. We have $100,000 here in Australia. Other skeptical groups around the world have other amounts. And I've just noticed that coming up on the 3rd of May, Tuesday the 3rd of May, at the Morty Skeptics, down there in Victoria, at the Mordialloc Sporting Club, they have their annual soapbox. If you're in Melbourne or you live down near Mordialloc, check it out. And the best place to check out the Morty Skeptics is Meetup, or just Google MORDI Skeptics. Ooh, what's this? Tuesday, July the 5th, Dr. Steve Roberts on UFOs. Ooh, I might make that one. That sounds good. Coming up on next week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, probably more kittens. Now, and there's one sitting in the window now. No, you can't open the window. I'm sorry, not yet. You can yawn at me all you like. Coming up next week on the Skeptic Zone, yes, more kittens. And, well, sometimes we just don't know. We just don't know. I think we'll probably follow up on some of the stories I mentioned before, the cowgirl refusing medical treatment and Robert De Niro vaxxed saga. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders, Henrietta and Maud, the Skeptic Zone cats, signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @SkepticZone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.